Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the DD Geopolitics live stream. And happy Friday. I am joined once again by my favorite John and one of my favorite anti-imperialist homies, Daniel McAdams, the executive director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity and an advocate for non-interventionist foreign policy, which we are going to talk about today. First, I want to ask Daniel, how are you? You were just traveling.
Yes, I'm doing great. I'm traveling again, actually at the end of the week, or the beginning of next week, to Washington, D.C. for a big conference.
Well, we'll get to that. But first, I do want to preface the whole episode by talking about a little bit about Scott Ritter, amongst others. He's just the most prominent example I have off the top of my head. So in recent weeks, Scott was raided by the FBI. This comes after his passport was confiscated. And then shortly on the heels of that, we have the prime minister from across the pond and the UK. They're arresting people and putting them in jail for being mean online and that kind of thing. And now we're hearing that misogyny is now going to be something we're really ramping up on the censorship. In light of these escalating measures, how do you think we can safeguard our freedom of speech and protect individuals from state-led censorship, especially when like governments are criminalizing opinions and political views? Like a lot of these are politically charged statements that people are being persecuted for. And add any other thoughts you have. I mean, the New York Times article came out. I think I got 5 or 6 messages that were like, "You think you're next?" And I'm like, "No, I've already had my turn." But but that's kind of, and then a person in here said Colonel McGregor and Larry Johnson are next. And I said Larry as well. Sorry, Larry, we're not meaning to jinx you. But the insinuation was this is something that they're going to continue doing.
Well, I mean, I know the colonel pretty well, and I know that he's always very, very careful. And I don't think that I could be wrong, but I don't believe he's ever done an interview on a Russian or any foreign news outlet. And I think that's probably part of the reason, just to not make it any easier for him. But it's not only this New York Times article is absolutely startling. It looks, I do a show with Dr. Paul, as you know, and I said, I feel like I just sort of like woke up in 2016, because it's literally the exact same talking points that are proved completely wrong. And if you follow the links to all of these supposedly, dangerous groups and dangerous things, it's just, like some guy with a blog somewhere. It's, this is it was like those cool ads on Facebook. Remember in 2016 with Hillary wrestling the devil and all that stuff. That was, I mean, if the Russians did that, hats off to them. That was really cool. But but it's not just that, and it's not just what happened to Dimitri Simes, which, I mean, how ironic. Someone like Dimitri Simes has his house raided in Virginia. But it's also, if you notice on YouTube, there have been a lot of cancellations. Judge Napolitano ran into trouble with YouTube because he had Pepe Escobar on, and Pepe knows a little bit about the world, and he said a couple words that you're not supposed to use. But George Galloway had some shows taken down. I think all the shows that he did with Scott were taken down, and a few others recently that I've seen. I did a post on Twitter about it. So I do think that they still are beholden to governments. YouTube is, for sure. And you're seeing just sort of, and I think this is just a dangerous couple of months, a dangerous 2 or 3 months right now for anyone speaking out. And they're desperate right now, and even more desperate after some of the things that happened today, which we won't want to talk about, to squelch any debate on these issues.
Yeah, it feels like Groundhog Day. It's Russia, Russia, Russia all over again, 2016, 2020. It's the same playbook. I feel like more Americans are a bit onto it this time. But of course, around this time of year during an election season, I'm always reminded about the power of the corporate media to craft and shape narratives. It was only a few weeks ago now that it felt like everybody was saying that Trump was a shoo-in after the failed assassination attempt. And now the Democrats have really ramped back up their media messaging. Of course, Kamala is now the nominee. And we're seeing just an endless stream of commercials, of ads. And notably, she's also not conducting any interviews. All in preparation, all in lead up to the Democratic convention, which we saw this week. And I was, when it comes to this line, the article that the New York Times published, and then coupled with some of the speeches that we saw at the DNC, I was incredibly worried to hear some of the rhetoric that they really are leaning into the demonization of Russia and a lot of these other countries that have been labeled the enemies of the United States. And I want to play a video for you from Kamala's speech last night. I think it might be the only one that I'm able to play just to keep my blood pressure low enough.
I didn't watch any, so I'm excited.
I will make sure that we lead the world into the future on space and artificial intelligence, that America, not China, wins the competition for the 21st century, and that we strengthen, not abdicate, our global leadership. Trump, on the other hand, threatened to abandon NATO. He encouraged Putin to invade our allies, said Russia could, quote, do whatever the hell they want. 5 days before Russia attacked Ukraine, I met with President Zelensky to warn him about Russia's plan to invade. I helped mobilize a global response, over 50 countries, to defend against Putin's aggression. President, I will stand strong with Ukraine and our NATO allies.
So there it is. There it is. You had the China demonization.
He warned Zelensky. That did a lot of good, warning him, and really prevented a lot.
Oh, it helped the Ukrainian people so much, right? I mean, their country is destroyed. Thank you, Kamala. But she doubled down on all of it, and to thunderous applause from the audience, which always shocks me. Dude, this is supposed to be I thought this was supposed to be the anti-war party, or the party that billed themselves, for the first part of the 21st century at least, as the party that was more against war. That seems like it's gone completely out the window. But Daniel, I'm interested to get your reactions to that.
I mean, I thought I was, high or something. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. I mean, first of all, Kamala was basically invisible these 3.5 years. She was only known for gaffes, and there was, I think, a news analysis that came out a couple of days ago where press coverage for her is 86% positive and press coverage for Trump is 89% negative. So she has that secret, very, very powerful group. But this is the most unpopular vice president in the history of polling. And all of a sudden, the next one day later, after receiving 0 votes, she's this great leader. I mean, and she's probably good at reading a teleprompter, but it's just astonishing for her to take credit for trying to prevent the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's insane.
Yeah, I'm curious to get your thoughts about what you think a Kamala presidency will bring. Of course, we know that Kamala, when it comes to her foreign policy chops, every time she spoke about, for example, the conflict in Ukraine, the Ukraine war, she describes it in the most simple terms, as if she knows nothing about the history of the conflict. She famously said in an interview that basically Ukraine is a small nation and Russia is a bigger country, and it's bad for a big country to invade a smaller country. And that's about
the extent.
Right. But I want to get your thoughts about, what is, do you see her as kind of particularly dangerous in terms of being kind of a stooge of the war interests and the coterie of the military industrial complex that really just fuels war? It seems like she's the perfect puppet.
She's a completely empty vessel. She has 0 foreign policy experience, 0 domestic policy experience. A couple of things they gave her, she bungled up and was really uninterested in doing. But I think you're right. I mean, I think she's the dream candidate for the military industrial complex, because, I mean, even old Joe Biden, he had a foreign policy history that goes back many decades, and his history is of supporting every war that he's ever seen. But nevertheless, Kamala is perfect because, I mean, the whole world has been reinvented. I mean, she's promising to fix the problems that were created by the 3.5 years of her being vice president. And she's also said that she's going to change her foreign policy team. So I think that's going to be a huge, huge incentive for the neocons in Washington to get on board Team Kamala. And they'll be able to pour whatever they want into her, whatever slogan they want into her, and they'll be continuing to reap the benefits of the policy. And unless things blow up before then, unless Putin gets serious about what's happening in Kursk, for example, or some other of the red lines. But right now, yeah, she's a dream She's a dream come true. And the problem with Trump, the reason they hated Trump is not because he's against war, not because he's a peace candidate, but because he's unpredictable. You don't know what he's going to do next. And I guess we'll probably get into the Gaza and Middle East stuff, but
We won't.
Okay, good. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, good. We did that yesterday because I said that we
Okay,
got it.
good. Okay, stay away. But the one thing I would say that
That's
Trump
great.
said, Trump being probably at least vocally the most pro-Israel candidate ever, he said, look, there's enough killing going on. You got to finish this thing, get it over with. So he doesn't want to look bad, and that's what motivates him. So he's not very trustworthy when it comes to this. And plus, he's been treated very badly by European leaders right now. So he doesn't forget a slight. And so Kamala is perfect for the status quo.
We're going to touch on that again in 1 second, but I want to ask a question about RFK Jr. He doesn't drop out. He did like a soft dropout today. He's staying on the ballot in some states. Pennsylvania, I think, was one of the more notable ones. He's officially going to endorse Trump, possibly getting a seat or a role in his administration. But he said he wants to shatter the CIA and scatter it into 1,000 pieces, calling out Kamala, calling them the permanent war party, saying the Democrats have become the war party, etc., which just goes along with kind of what you were just saying. What is your take on RFK Jr. Not going over so much, but verbalizing the fact that he's going to stand with the Republicans this round?
Well, the thing I like best about it is it's a final middle finger to the Democratic Party.
The Kennedys.
They screwed him over big time. They did everything they could. And I didn't watch the whole speech, but he outlined it from what I saw very well in the speech of all the dirty tricks they had on him. And so he gave him the final FU and said, okay, then I'll get Trump elected, which may well happen. And it was I think it was clever. Now there's a lot of love for RFK Jr. on Twitter X now among the Republicans. You'll see a lot of that. We sort of fantasize about him being given the CIA, but I can't imagine that happening. But hopefully, there are other things that he could be given that would be good. He's very vocally in favor of free speech. He's in favor of medical freedom. So a lot of positive things that could contribute to a Trump administration. They better give him something decent. I'd love to see him get the CIA, but then again, I loved RFK at first, but then his foreign policy, particularly his Middle East policy, was so awful that it just trumped everything else that I thought was good about his candidacy. So I just sort of didn't get involved.
So what we do have, and John is noticing the same thing, is that there's a pro-war camp, some Republicans against Trump lining up behind Kamala. I read a really interesting article. I can't verify it, so I won't go into too much detail, but it was alluding to the fact that very prominent online streamers who were sort of diehard Trumpers are now saying if he's not, they're going with Kamala under this weird, she's less of a Zionist disguise, but really it's about keeping the Ukrainian war going, but using the Gaza, and I don't want to get into Gaza Israel, but using that as being we have more of a chance for a ceasefire if we can get Kamala in, but we have more of a chance of perpetuating the war in the Ukraine, which is really what matters the most, because world wars start in the Balkans or Eastern Europe, and we'll get to that later. So I'm kind of wondering a little bit about that. These pro-war, these neocons, these war hawks, after RFK saying Democrat Party's the war party now, and now they're kind of lining up behind Kamala.
Yeah, they're terrified of the cutoff that's going to happen if Trump gets elected for the Ukraine war. I can't see, unless he is so out of tune with his voters, I cannot see him after what's happened. I cannot see him get into office and continue funding the war as it's been going. So I think they're seeing a lot of desperation there. The idea of trying to resell Kamala Harris as some sort of peacenik in the Middle East, again, it's hard to imagine. This is, but she can do it. She's reinvented every day. She's brand new every day, and she could just reemerge as the voice of peace. In the Middle East. It's something that Biden has not been able to do. He struggled with this because he struggled with the progressive wing of the party, which is important in several key swing states for the Democrats, and he has never been able to. He talked himself into a corner after October 7th. He's never been able to get out of it. But Kamala, she's not burdened by what was a great saying? I'm going to screw it up. But,
Wait.
yeah.
We can be unburdened by what has been. Wait, what does it say? Oh my God. Somebody will tell me in the comments. I say it almost every show.
It's totally Chauncey Gardner, though. I mean, Chauncey was a nice guy. He was a simpleton, but did good things. Kamala is a simpleton, but is very evil and malevolent. But it's the same kind of thing, just spouting off of these platitudes.
What we can be unburdened by what has been. That's
There
it.
you go. There you go.
I.e. sobriety.
Yeah, we're definitely unburdened by sobriety right now and in the USA.
Oh, I mean, yeah, and in many ways, the vice president is it's kind of a nebulous position. So it's kind of perfect to not really not claim responsibility for the things that have gone badly, and then also say that you were involved for the things that have gone well. But yeah, no, the point on, they talked about Palestine a couple of times. They had speakers come up, and that one always rankles me because it's just so hypocritical. And it's so obvious that they just want to continue the status quo when they're talking about the hostages and the ceasefire in the same breath. It's like, and then getting back to kind of the major geopolitical conflicts, the targeting of Russia, there's absolutely no recognition about how all of these conflicts across the world are interconnected, right? You have the Russians now providing some material support to axis of resistance countries. And our leadership knows very well that countries like Russia and China do create a material basis and foundation for things like the Palestinian resistance and anti-imperialist struggles. But one of the interesting lines that I've seen over the course of the last couple of weeks is the United States tried to distance themselves from this latest escalation by the Ukrainians, the incursion into Kursk, going into the sovereign territory of Russia for the first time in decades since World War II, that there's been a land invasion like this. And I wonder what you think about this. Is there any credence to their arguments at all? What do you make of this kind of obvious lie that the United States wasn't involved in any way into the incursion in Kursk?
Well, I think we knew it was a lie because they denied it. That's like the first indication that it's a lie, and they denied it pretty vehemently, pretty strongly. But the idea that Zelensky somehow makes decisions for Ukraine right now, I mean, anyone who believes that, well, I've got a bridge to sell you, as they say. It's absolutely not the case. The guy's getting increasingly desperate. I mean, to me, and I've worked in Washington for a long time. I've actually even worked around neocons for a while. And at the risk of saying something crude, I mean, this is sort of a neocon wet dream. I mean, this is the kind of things they cook up. They cook up crazy ideas and they sell them to each other because they live in an echo chamber. And this, to me, it strikes me as a classic. Let's go big. Let's go bold. Let's do something. The Russians are not, and even Zelensky said, I think yesterday, we've crossed so many red lines and they haven't done anything. So come on, guys, wake up. Let's do more of this. And that's exactly, that's exactly how the neocons talk. And it works fine until it doesn't. And I don't know if we're at that doesn't yet, but we may well be.
And then there's also the pattern of, once these things go awry, just blaming everybody except for officials in the United States, and then throwing the political leaders of other countries under the bus. So from one day to the next, if you have a best friend in Washington, you better watch out because they could very quickly turn into your greatest enemy. I mean,
that's the only silver lining. It's like, hey, it wasn't us, it was Keir Starmer. Hey, it wasn't us, it was Macron. It was Schultz. Don't blame us, we weren't involved. And so all those guys have it coming. And then some. So that's the only part that's worth watching. Otherwise, the movie sucks.
Well, what do you see for the United States in terms of some of the political rhetoric that it's levying against Russia? Of course, we saw what Kamala just said in that clip. But what is your expectation for how this will progress, and where does the fight for peace go from here? What are some of the important things that I think that we need to think about as people who love democracy, people that love peace, people that are anti-imperialist and don't want to see an increase in tensions and actual physical conflict? What are some of the things that your institute is doing, that the Ron Paul Institute is doing, and what should we be focused on in order to try to avert some of the worst aspects of what seems to be a coming world war? Some say we're already in it.
Well, I mean, it's difficult because it's easy to get discouraged. There's no simple thing that we can do. And there's a war on speech. There's a war on speaking out. I mean, one of the things that we do is we try to speak out while we can, while we still can. And now we know from what happened to Scott. And I don't know if you read, he did a great piece for Consortium News. I don't know if you guys read that. It was a very long piece, and it really goes into great detail as to what exactly they took from his house and the importance of it. It was his entire work as a weapons inspector. It was the entire history of all the BS that went on before the invasion of Iraq. So if they take that and lose it, which they probably will, it's a big deal. But the intent of doing this is to encourage the others, and encourage the others to be quiet. And if the New York Times article is in any way, shape, or form correct, it means they could be coming for other people. And I won't name names, but I have a friend of mine who wrote a lot for a publication that they don't like. And he had a black car show up at his house and say, "Look, do you want to go to jail for 5 years? Stop writing for this organization, for this outlet." And of course, you're going to do that because they can do whatever they want. They could. I mean, you joked, Sarah, about you were there once, but it could happen again. It could happen to me. I joked with Dr. Paul on the show. I mean, literally everything in that article we could all be accused of doing, because one of the things you get hit for is Russian talking points. Oh, you mean like the U.S. overthrew the government in 2014 in Ukraine? Oh, you mean like Russia's winning? I mean, so observing objective reality is somehow Russian talking points. And they've got the guns, so they can do what they want. So I mean, that's kind of discouraging. But we can speak out as long as we can and do whatever we can and try to convince more people. It only takes a few acts of bravery, I think, to sort of coalesce people together. And that's what we're all about. We're not a right wing or a left wing or a libertarian organization. We're the broadest coalition possible. That's what we intend to do.
Yeah.
You wanted to get into Nord Stream, John, before we move on?
I want to get into Nord Stream real quick because I do think it's important. Just kind of ending on that point, we have to be able to call out the lies, and we have a much stronger ability to do that when we're unified, when we're not kind of engaging in the sectarianism that, of course, the people who promote war want us to engage in, because it makes it very hard to identify some of the lies. One of which, one of the big crimes that we saw. It's how long ago has it been now? It's been almost 2 years now since the Nord Stream pipeline explosion. And this was obviously a massive ecological disaster. It was also a big attack on Germany's energy sovereignty. And now we're hearing, of course, in the initial stages, the United States was blaming Russia for some reason why they would blow up their own natural gas pipeline. But now we saw a recent report, according to the Wall Street Journal, that the sabotage operation involved a small sailing boat and a team of 6 people, which were supposedly a combination of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians with relevant expertise. The Wall Street Journal article also said that the operation used private funding, but was directed by a serving army general who reported to Ukraine's then commander-in-chief, Zaluzhny, and that Zelensky himself approved the plan, but then later backtracked after the CIA found out about it and asked Kyiv to call it off. So again, you have the CIA in this very blatant type of like eco-terrorism, basically denying involvement in this. Yet, we remember, those of us who were actually following these developments, remember that the U.S. government was explicitly suggesting that Russia was behind it. So they have to be lying about something. Because even if we accept, this Wall Street Journal reporting is true, it means that the CIA knew about it, hid these facts, and then the U.S. government lied about it and even tried to pin it on Russia. So I'm curious to get your thoughts about, how far it seems like our government is willing to go at this period of time just to blatantly lie to us about global affairs.
Well, the best part about the Wall Street Journal article was that it was like these guys were hanging out at a pub and they were drunk and they said, "Hey, I got a good idea, let's go blow up the Nord Stream pipeline." I mean, we're supposed to believe that? I mean, I think the guys who sat around getting drunk or the Wall Street Journal guys who wrote about it. That's not the kind of thing you do after you've had a couple too many drinks. I mean, not that I would know, but generally speaking, that is not the first thing that comes to mind. So, I mean, it's such a crazy, crazy story. But obviously it was put there for a reason. at this particular time. And some have speculated that it might be an off-ramp for Germany, because the Germans, at least according to recent reporting, have decided that next year they won't be budgeting the kinds of money for weapons that they had in the past for Ukraine. So that might be an off-ramp for them. But I think the Cy-Hurst reporting from the beginning is the one that certainly rings true the most for those of us who've seen these kinds of operations in the past. Now this is that times 100. I mean, this is such a bold act of war that it's just hard to believe that the U.S. government would do it. And I guess that's what makes it most likely that they did do it. But it puts Germany in an incredibly awkward position, because for all intents and purposes they should cite Article 5 of the NATO treaty, saying that actually it turns out we were attacked. We were attacked by the people that we've been giving $100 billion to, but nothing to see here. It's astonishing. I mean, look what happened and the Germans talk about being a punching bag for the U.S. And you talked about it earlier, Sarah, about how we treat our allies. I mean, look what we did to Merkel. She did everything that they wanted, and they still tapped her phone and treated her like crap. Now you're seeing the same with Schultz. But the kicker is that they've all destroyed their economy to do it, and they've got really nowhere to go now. So it's an insane, crazy experience, and it's crazy to watch what happened. But so the question is, what will happen now if this does come out, and what happens to Zelensky? He's sitting in London as an ambassador. You think that the Keir Starmer would kick him out? I mean, this guy's an international terrorist if he was involved in it.
Literally. And speaking of the CIA, they have been busy bees. And I say it often, my viewers are probably going to yell that I'm annoying them, but Dugin said the World War III started when Ukrainian counteroffensive was accepted as failed. And I kind of didn't take it too seriously, but in the back of my mind. And now that I'm looking back, I think that he was really on something. So I just want to play a little video. It's an intermission for you guys. It's a little bit long. It's 4 minutes. So just kind of setting the tone for what happened in Eastern Europe, and then we'll bring us back up to today. So 1 second.
After a controversial referendum, Montenegro became the newest country of the world.
55.4% of citizens voted for independence of Montenegro.
However, another part of the former Yugoslavia still wanted that title. You guessed it, Kosovo. In the same year, negotiations began between the Belgrade government and the Albanian minority over the status of Kosovo. However, the so-called negotiations were a farce from the beginning, as almost all the Western powers were promising Kosovo independence regardless of the negotiations.
Sooner rather than later, you got to say enough's enough. Kosovo's independent. And that's the position we've taken. The people of Kosovo need to know that it is a solid, firm position. And even though there's diplomacy and talks, but if it's apparent that that's not going to happen in a relatively quick period of time, in my judgment, we need to put forward the resolution.
Think about it. If you had some of the world's largest powers telling you that you can get whatever you want, why the hell would you settle for any less and try to reach a compromise? As anticipated, the talks broke down and Kosovo unilaterally declared independence.
It has been an honor to welcome the President and Prime Minister of an independent Kosovo to the Oval Office. I'm proud you all are here. I welcome you. I'm a strong supporter of Kosovo's independence. I pledge that the United States would continue to work with those nations that have not recognized an independent Kosovo to convince them to do so as quickly as possible.
Contrary to what Bush had hoped, the majority of the world countries didn't recognize Kosovo, and it didn't even become a UN member state. Thus, Kosovo failed to become a country. What was absurd in this story is that the Albanian minority, which in all fairness did suffer greatly throughout the 1990s, thought that they actually got independence in 2008.
Big day for Kosovo people, Albanians. Yeah.
How do you feel?
Oh, I am feeling very, very good. This is like a dream.
As a Serb, I feel sorry for the Albanians because they've been duped even more than we have. They think they have an independent state. Kosovo is a U.S. military base. It happens to have some local color called Albanians, some local foliage like leaves on the trees.
Institucionet e popullit Kosovës do të përulet për jetë me respektin më të lartë për ju zoti president dhe Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës dhe popullin amerikan.
But whether they could decide to do something not consistent with U.S. wishes, impossible.
Do you think the Kosovo government could do anything without the Americans agreeing with it?
No. Never. Ne bi verovao da će moći nešto uraditi bez Amerikanca, Engleza, Nemaca, sile Francuske i te stvari.
Da li smatrate da kosovska vlada može da donese neke odluke koje nisu u saglasnosti sa Amerikancima, recimo?
Ne može.
Zbog čega?
Ne može. Amerika je Amerika. Ne može.
Ne verujem.
We listen Americans. America, there are 50 countries, states, yeah. So why Kosovo not be a part of America?
Let's support that?
Yes, why not? They are just administrating everything in Kosovo.
The Americans are in control?
Yeah, they are pretty much in control here.
We are not independent from Europe and from America.
I'm sorry that I played the whole thing, but I really wanted to show all of the kind of fault lines that occur in that region, not just the Balkans, but all the way down through the Caucasus, and even in obviously in Ukraine. So I kind of wanted to talk about the CIA's current foray into that area after the Nord Stream thing, and we have an excursion into Russia. So at the same time, we have tensions building in the Armenian corridor. The Georgian parliament is kind of breaking away from its president. Armenia is saying, I think we're going to leave SISTO. And now the CIA has taken a world tour through the Balkans. In addition to that, and we'll get to the other parts later, there are a slew of information ops inside of the Balkans, American info ops inside of the Balkans now too. What have you observed during this trip? Oh, I guess I should also mention that a week or two ago, shout out to Che Bose with your gorgeous front cover, even though you didn't tip him off, but he got credit for tipping off Vucic about a potential coup or a color revolution, the president of Serbia. The Serbs are protesting a potential lithium mine in their country opening up by a German and a UK and an American conglomerate, and now the CIA is there. I mean, do I need to say more? But Daniel, I do want to get your thoughts on the whole debacle, and then I'll talk about some of the info ops.
Well, this Serbia is absolutely key to U.S. interests in the region. Serbia has with its historic ties to Russia. I mean, this goes back to the coup against Milosevic in 2000. That's when the U.S. took over Serbia, and I think they've owned every leader since then. I mean, they put in power Koštunica, who was a stooge, and he was the perfect kind of stooge because he was a nationalist. He was a strong Serb nationalist, and so a lot of the Serbs who were pissed off that the U.S. overthrew Milosevic, they said, well, at least we've got our guy. He's going to stand up for us. And it's been that way in Serbia the entire time. The same thing happened in Montenegro, and I was there for the elections in '98, I think it was, when Djindjic stole it from Bulatovic, and the U.S. was behind it. And the funny thing is, I'm glad to have watched that because it brings back a lot of memories. But, Thaci was considered an international terrorist, for so long. And then he became a freedom fighter. And the same thing happened to Djindjic in Montenegro. He was just a little cigarette trafficker.
Yes,
that's what he was considered at the time, until he became useful to the U.S. And then he became a great leader, a great, a proponent of democracy and freedom. It really, the movie made about it, a fiction movie, but Wag the Dog. You can create anything, any fantasy you want, if you want to control the region. And I really appreciate what in that clip, the people talking, the Serbian fellow who talked about being sorry for the Albanians, because Albanians really are wonderful and trusting people. I spent a lot of time in Albania. I knew President Sali Berisha, and it's sad to see him up there doing what he did. I think they Berisha himself was a victim of a regime change back in 1996 when the U.S. wanted to get him deeper into the Yugoslav war, the breakup of Yugoslavia. And he was very, very trusting of the U.S., but he didn't want to go that far. He wanted to remain independent. And as soon as he said no to the U.S., who wanted to put a listening post off the, and Berisha himself told me this, by the way, they wanted to put a listening post on an island offshore from Albania. And he said, no, I don't want to get involved in the war in Yugoslavia. Boom. They turned on a dime and Berisha became the enemy. And pretty soon you had the revolution in Albania, which killed a couple thousand people. I was there in the middle of it, by the way. So this is the kind of game that the U.S. plays. The Balkans is such a critical part. And from the beginning, the encouragement of the breakup of Yugoslavia. So from then on until where we are today with Vučić, who's in a very strange situation. You bring in the CIA and people could overemphasize the role that they play, but I think they're like a cat and they've got him exactly where they want him because he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. The protests of the Rio Tinto, that they've got him on a chain that they can yank anytime.
Yeah, and you touched on some of the things, and since you're so well versed in the Balkans, especially during the 90s, I do want to tread lightly, but I do want to touch a little bit on the religious thing because the religious identity politics don't work in the Balkans because that's just not how the divisions work there. So we have a very huge religious schism happening because of the genocide in Gaza, obviously from Jews against Muslims. And then we saw a very strong coalition form between the Muslims and the Christians, naturally and understandably so, them asking questions. And I'm just talking about online. I'm not talking about politically or in international. I'm just talking about online discourse. And then we get up into this and now we start to get really hairy. And I notice myself talking about it. And I'm like, okay, these crazy, maniacal, dogmatic people, these identity politic people, these, these sort of, like, I don't want to call them neo-Nazis, but they're sort of fascist people. There's other religious ideologues. There's some, populists, etc. They don't understand, because the Balkans is so lesser known, that those sort of sectarian divides don't make any sense anymore. We have Iran creating very strong alliances with Serbia. Serbia has always had a strong relationship with Palestine. They're also incredibly close to China. And, I see a lot of confusion when these people who are anti-Zionist, they get up into the Balkans. And I wanted to touch on this too, because now we have these streamers, and I don't know how in tune you are. I'm terminally online, guys. I'm embarrassed to say it anymore. I feel like I know all of these people and I've have grown up with them, but I'm watching what's happening with Andrew Tate. I don't care what he does in his personal life, regardless. I know what happens politically when those kinds of things occur. He's got the mafia and the police and a lot of those gangs in his pocket. And then we get up and there's streamers that have just started arriving in all of these strange places in the Balkans. We have a very popular young male streamer who's very, very, very popular amongst the 18 to 30, maybe even the 15 to 30 young men running around Albania talking and posting verbatim, Serbia is the Israel of Europe, which couldn't be further from the truth. If anything, Serbia is the Palestine in that scenario, saying the Serbs are the Jews of Europe. There's nothing worse than the Serbs, et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of wanted to touch on that because it's a very scary rhetoric coming from, this younger generation who was definitely born after the Balkan Wars and is now kind of, they're doing this my team, your team thing. And now we're getting into the Balkans. And I don't know that people really realize how, your next door neighbor could be the president. Like these places, you have access to politicians, and they forget that in 2014, the big climax of the Maidan started on Facebook. So I'm wondering what kind of, if you've noticed anything, any more propaganda, information ops, sort of weird things in that kind of Eastern corridor, and how you've seen them start to exploit maybe religious divides given the current climate of the international community. I'm not really sure. It's just troubling to me.
No, it's a good observation, and I think our spooks have an unlimited budget for influence operations, and they do work. They worked in the effort to break apart Yugoslavia, and I remember back in the late '90s walking around in Vukovar, which was just such a depressing disaster. And we talked to people on the street, and they said, I had no idea that my relative or that my neighbor was a Serb and an Orthodox, and I should hate them because of that. I'm Croatian, I'm Catholic, and you had this over and over. But the sectarianism is such a powerful force in the region, and I think definitely during the Bosnian War, the Muslim aspect was played up very, very strongly. And now you have in Albania, you have a military base with these crazed people from the MEK who can strike at Iran at any time.
Please, can you go into a little bit more detail? Because that's one of those shadowy organizations that I find myself mentioning, and people are like, you sound like a crazy person. What are you talking about?
Yeah, because no one will believe you because it's so insane. I mean,
this Iranian cult is in the middle of Albania.
Yeah, it's a military camp, Camp Ashram, and they are terrorists. The MEK, it's the People's Mujahideen cult. They have killed Americans. They were only taken off of the terrorist list by Hillary Clinton because she realized, these guys are pretty useful. They like to kill. They have the same enemies that we do, which is the Iranian government. So what are we doing? In fact, it was kind of funny. I mean, we did a lot of crazy things when I was on the Hill, but the MEK, before they were taken off the list, they would have protests all the time, right around the House office buildings. And so once I called up and said, I want to report terrorist activity because there is an internationally recognized terrorist group on the corner of my building having a protest, and it didn't go over well. It didn't stop them, but there's a huge opportunity there in the Balkans because it is such a fault line for all of these different areas, and it's very easy. I would note one thing that's interesting, though, if you talk about Serbia and the vice grip that it's in right now. And here's something that your viewers may not know, but the Assistant Secretary of State for Energy Affairs, and that's the person who's the very hands-on, directly involved in this Rio Tinto mining business. Well, guess who he is? His name is Jeffrey Pyatt, and we remember him from 2014.
What?
Yeah, he's a regime change. Yeah. He's a regime change specialist for Ukraine.
Wasn't he on the phone when she was saying Yats is the guy? Yeah, isn't that who was on the other end? Yeah, Yats is our guy. Oh my
and
God.
This is what state and CIA do. They put regime change specialists. They go from one place to another. I think he may have actually been in Greece after that. But in the names escape me now. But there were people who were involved in a lot of the right-wing death squads in Latin America in the 80s, and a lot of them ended up in places like the Balkans in the 90s because they were specialists in overthrowing governments. And one of them, his name is William, but it escapes me now. But so you can follow these guys' careers, and they go wherever a regime change is needed. And right now, they're turning the screws on Vucic right now. And he's, as I say, he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't with this mine business.
Yeah, well, can you say a little bit more, just zooming out a little bit, as to why Serbia has come in the crosshairs and the Balkans in general are significant? We understand the developing geopolitical situation with the Belt and Road Initiative, all of these different poles of power kind of beginning to emerge. And I'm wondering if you could illuminate a little bit more detail onto why the Balkans have always been in the crosshairs, but now, of course, are something that it seems like our government is pivoting back toward.
Because the regime has a weak underbelly. The U.S. can't brook any opposition whatsoever, and the Serbia is the weak underbelly for the U.S. Empire in Europe because of Serbia's long history with Russia. They share a Cyrillic language, they share an Orthodox faith. The Bulgarians have long been defanged. They would traditionally have that role, but they've long been defanged. So it's left to Serbia, and they're not allowed to have any independent foreign policy. And Sarah, you mentioned the Caucasus earlier. The same is true with Georgia. I mean, Georgia does not want to be a Russian satellite. Full stop. That's the last thing he wants. Nevertheless, because he didn't say how high when the U.S. said jump when it comes to this foreign agents law, well, all of a sudden he's a mortal enemy and he has to be regime changed. And so it doesn't show strength of our values, strength of our democracy. It shows the inherent weakness of the U.S. global military empire, or the GAE, as some friends of mine would call it, the gay. This shows the weakness of the global American empire. This shows the weakness. They cannot broker any contradiction or any contrary views whatsoever. And I think that's why they've kept Vucic on a tight leash and will continue to do so. I mean, when you can control hundreds of thousands of protesters over this mine business, and this mine business is a classic kind of imperialist endeavor, isn't it? I mean, we will completely destroy your environment. In exchange, we'll get rich, and we'll bail out the Germans because they screwed up their entire energy industry.
Yep.
They put everything into the EV basket. And by the way, I looked it up before we went on. Demand for electric vehicles in Europe in the month of July only fell by 7.8%. So the thing is, the whole thing is cratering, but they're betting the farm on this being the savior of forcing everyone to buy electric vehicles that they don't want to buy. So that's a long way of saying they're in an absolute bind, and they can squeeze whenever they want to squeeze, and that's what they're doing to Serbia now.
So then I have to ask, and I'll just put it up to all of us for discussion. What is the potential? I always jokingly say every world war starts in the Balkans. I think that I was talking about it. I should say I was losing my mind. It's somebody in a space who was saying nothing's going to happen. And I said, you don't deploy 40,000 United States Navy sailors. You have no idea the logistics and the manpower that goes into an evolution of that size. We have them and sitting ducks in the Middle East with 2 carrier strike groups. We have Ukraine in Russia. John Kirby comes out today and says we're going to encourage them to strike even deeper into Russia, and the CIA is in the Balkans, and Azerbaijan just applied to join BRICS, and Armenia is a shit show, and Georgia is, like you said, they don't want to be a Russian satellite, and they don't want to be an American satellite, so they have their own issues as well. What's the potential? Because I don't foresee a World War III. Like, I'm sorry to the listeners and the viewers, but Israel-Palestine is not where World War III starts. That's not the heartland. That's the rimland. So what are the chances that World War III breaks out in Eastern Europe again? And I also want to stress to our listeners, if you're free tonight, look up the Phoenix program and how it developed, and understand that they have color revolution cells all over the globe that can get activated at any moment. And they're very, 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 very enriched in the Balkans. George Soros is there as well. He has mining interests in Kosovo. That's another video I just posted on DDG. So what do you guys think is the potential for a World War III starting in that region?
Well, the interesting thing is, the goal has always been regime change against Putin, and they've always gone about it in the worst possible way. They thought they were going to achieve it by this war with Ukraine. Ironically, they actually may well achieve it by the opposite, by doing things that are so bold and so insane, and Putin's natural, very conservative approach toward things, very hesitant to escalate. That may well bring about a coup from the right, for lack of a better term, because people are getting frustrated with these red lines being crossed, and you may have people that really want a war, overthrowing him from the right, from the militaristic side. So ironically, they may get what they want in that. But I would say we've got like 75 days to go, and if we can survive then, and the Trump administration comes in, and we don't see John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, sashaying back into action, then we may see the plug pulled on the thing, which means that these are 70 very, very dangerous days.
It's a bit poetic, because when the Soviet Union collapsed and the United States really was able to assert its global empire unimpeded by any second major force to counteract them, there were scores to settle, right? And Yugoslavia was one of the first ones that was on the table. And of course, it was dismembered using the dual warfare that the United States uses, propaganda, military. And it's just a bit, it would be poetic to see a real, genuine war rear its head in this region, because this is really where the United States kind of stamped out its claim on world domination, because there was no second force to come to the aid of Yugoslavia. But of course, now we're reaching this point where these dynamics, whether it's Russia, Russia's ascendancy, their realization of sovereignty, which I think is certainly only increased. You have to say that it's only increased throughout the course of the Ukraine war, as it's been targeted by the Western economy, has had to build up its other trade relationships with China, with Iran, with India. Now, this is the culmination of this other global force that has risen to the level of actually challenging U.S. imperialism. And once again, it seems that Serbia is caught right in the middle of the crosshairs. And then just from a strategic point of view, Belt and Road, I mean, it's the Mediterranean, the Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, the Balkans are an incredibly important piece of the puzzle in terms of the strategy, both from a military and economic point of view. So I think that it makes a lot of sense as to why the United States would target this as kind of the next pivot point. And also, Daniel, to your point, its underbelly might be the weakest. So if the United States is looking for more favorable ground to fight its propaganda and its military campaign, then the Balkans are a reasonable choice.
And say you're looking for a partner, who would you go for? The guy with $35 trillion in debt that doesn't build a single thing anymore, or the people who are in construction, who are building high-speed trains? I mean, look at China's high-speed train network.
Who has LGBTQ values? That's the one that
right.
I'm going to.
Yeah, that's right.
Where's the Walmart?
Yeah,
Walmart
right.
internet and gay things like
that's right. That's it. That's it. I mean, that's why everyone's attracted, because they want to build stuff, and other countries are building stuff. That's why the Indians are treading a fine line. But certainly when it comes to the relationship with Russia, it's been enormously profitable. In the course of this war, they've made so much money selling Russian gas with a new label on it, made in India, that it's just a big boon. And so other countries want to join the BRICS. They want to get involved in trade. That's what we used to be about, Come, let's trade. Of course, there were problems, whatever, but we used to be about building and trading, and now we're not. We're about bombing and sanctioning. It's no fun. The party is no fun anymore.
It's not attractive.
They're going where the keg is still full.
Well, humans are naturally attracted to innovation. They want to see new things. They want to see things that they've never seen before. And Drag Queen Story Quran Hour, sponsored by CARE at the local library in Dearborn, is not what normal Muslims in America want to see. So it's normal that people are becoming more attracted to these conservative values, and we see a very big push in Christianity as well, looking for more conservative traditional values. I think it's a good thing. I don't see any issues wrong with or anything wrong with it. But what I do want to ask is, as we close, and I won't monopolize any more of your Friday night, what you're going to DC for, and what's coming up, and how long do we have? When do we die, basically?
Oh, well, we all will die. That is one of those things. That's one of those questions you ponder as you increase in age. But you can, we hope to leave a better world for our children. And if we don't have children, for people that we care about, our relatives and their children. And that's one of the things we do at the Ron Paul Institute. Now we're going there a week from tomorrow to do a conference. We do it every year in the DC area, not DC proper, but out at Dulles, where it's easier to get to. But this year, because you got the Republican platform, you got Kamala's platform, you got the Democrat, this and that, we want to do something called the Liberty Platform. And the idea is that these are all integrated. It's not just about foreign policy. It's not just about civil liberties, although they're very important. But so this year we'll have speakers about medical freedom. We'll have Dr. Joe Mercola, who was canceled during COVID for saying things that we now accept as being pretty mainstream. We have Joel Salatin, the great lunatic farmer and environmentalist from Virginia, who's going to talk about the importance of food freedom. And this is one of the things. Now, I'm a big fan of Nicole Shanahan, RFK's running mate. And I don't know everything about her. I'm sure she has some kooky ideas on some things, whatever, but she is a very smart woman. And I've met her and I talked to her. And she's very big on food freedom and on healthy food and on getting between the corporations and the government in feeding Americans crap and making them, unhealthy and dead. So we want to talk about that. We want to talk about the war on speech. We have Professor John Mearsheimer, who's going to talk about foreign policy. He's our foreign policy guy this year, and I'm looking forward, even though I'm not a realist myself, I'm looking forward to probably one of the most eloquent champions of the realist school. So, the thing is, you asked a question earlier, Sarah, what can we do? I think one of the things we can do is get together, not just speak out. That's great. Your show is fantastic. I'm addicted to DD Geopolitics. I'm on like midnight. I'm in bed and I'm just like looking at your Telegram channel. So I'm totally addicted to what you do, but also getting together physically and meeting people who like, oh crap, that I was thinking that same thing. And that's the main thing. Great speakers are one thing, but you've got to have a human connection. That's why we don't do Zooms for our live conferences. We really want people to get together. I think it's just so important.
Someone in the one of our viewers said, "I love how hard Daniel goes." Yeah, Daniel doesn't care on X. He says whatever he wants. That's the first. I saw him say commenting on like political stuff, and then I looked at his bio. I was like, "This guy with this bio is saying this." Follow. So yeah, he's great. RFK. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Daniel. Please go follow Daniel on X. He's a regular on the show and great friend. And please if you're in the tri-state area in the Northeastern Corridor, please put it out there if you can attend, or if your friends or family can attend any of the talks, the Ron Paul Institute, or even the Schiller Institute, who Scott Ritter is involved with. And I think that's all we have for tonight. John, take us out.
Well, it's great to see work that is non-sectarian, that's really unifying the American people, and that appeals to people of all different backgrounds, because right, as Americans, we have so much in common. And we have a common interest in combating this war economy, this debt economy that's being pushed onto us by our financial elite. And that's both the Republicans and the Democratic Party, unfortunately. So now's the time for us to come together. And Daniel, I really appreciate the work that you're doing to those ends. So let's keep fighting the good fight.
And really, before we go for the weekend, 3 super chats. Thank you. Yes, Mina, love your show. What is the CIA director doing in Belgrade, and what will he do in Kosovo? I hope we gave you some hints. The risen people of Ireland, keep speaking up. Don't let them hinder you. And thank you, John, Sarah, and Daniel. Kosovo is and always will be the heart of Serbia. Yes, it definitely will. And we will see a free Palestine in our lifetime. Guys, you have a good weekend. We'll surprise you with our next guest. Find us on the spaces area. Play the music. Love you guys. Have a good weekend. Bye.